Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Thanks for coming to my channel. I appreciate it. If you enjoy the content here, would you make sure to hit the like button on your way out? I really appreciate that. It helps me to get my channel promoted. Today, I thought it's been a long time since I did any kind of bug jewelry, so I thought I'd do a butterfly pendant. We'll see if I can make something kind of ornate and pretty. I picked out some stones, a couple that one of my patrons, Bobby, sent me, so thanks for that, Bobby. And I'm going to use some amethyst and some peridot, and I think it'll turn out to be pretty. I hope it does. Before we get started, thank you to my YouTube subscribers. I appreciate all of your viewing and your comments, kind suggestions, as well as your financial contributions. I really appreciate those things. Thank you for taking the time to check my channel out and be a part of it. I also wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. They're a great group of people over there. I've learned so much from them. I hope they're learning as much from me as I am from them. It's just a really nice place, so thank you guys. I really look forward to each time we interact over there. With those things being said, let's get started on this project. I'll show you the stones that I picked out here. I pre-made some of the bezels in advance because there's going to be 6 bezels on this, and so I didn't want to make you have to slog through me making all of those. But these amethysts are from my friend Bobby, and this peridot is one that I had for a while. But I'm going to use those. This is going to be the body, this will be the head. And then these are going to be placed on the wings of the butterfly. And I think I'm going to curl the antenna over to make the bail, and I think that'll be kind of a cool look. So let me show you what I drew up here, so I can see what I drew up in here. This is my design idea book. I have these for sale on the merch store if you're interested. There's they got great little graph paper that's not really graph paper, but it's got the dots, so it helps me to keep things in proportion. I only drew one side of the butterfly I'm going to make, and he's not really assembled. But like I said, I'm going to put his amethyst marquee, that was a pretty big stone there. And then the peridot will be his head, and then I'll put something in the middle here as a connector between those 2 bezels. And I think I'm going to connect the bottom wing on first to this central body point, and then I'm going to overlap this wing a little bit over that to give it sort of a 3-dimensional look. And like I said, I'm going to ball up the end of these wires, and then we'll make a little bail out of that. And I think I'm going to put those little purple marquees right in the crook of the center, like right there, kind of. So this will be all kind of compressed and together. I think that'll be real pretty. There's a million different butterfly wing patterns you could come up with. You could add some spirals, all sorts of fun stuff in there you could do. You could get way more detailed on the design. I'm kind of keeping it sort of flowy and simple because you could go to town and really get it super detailed, but on the schedule I have, I just don't have time to do something quite that detailed. But I think this will come out pretty, so let's see how it turns out. I think I'm going to make the bezel for this guy here and for the peridot that I picked out. Oh, as far as the wire that I'm going to use for this, I think I'm going to use 16 gauge. If I went with 18, it's going to be just a little bit flimsier than I'd like, and 14 is going to look a little bit clunky. So I actually took some 14 and pulled it through my draw plate until it was 16 gauge, and I think that's what I'll use for that stuff. For the bezels on these, I'm using 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip that normally I use 26 gauge, which is a little thicker. I'm using 28 for these just because of the sharp points on these marquees. They're a little more challenging to bezel set. I use hard silver sheet solder primarily. There's very few instances where I use a little bit of easy solder. And I use a My-T-Flux, which is a spray-on flux. Not everybody does it that way, and that's fine. Everybody has kind of their own way of doing things. When you're measuring for a marquee, you're not going to measure with the the bezel right to the point there, because you'll never get it to match up nicely on both sides then. You want the connection to be in the middle of the side somewhere. So I'm going to make a starter bend on this. That. And maybe do a little bit of manual curving. If you're new to this, I probably wouldn't make your first bezel a marquee. Or even your first faceted stone bezel, I wouldn't make a marquee, because they're just a little more challenging. So I'm going to try and get it tucked up in there as tight as I can. And once that's there, I can kind of make a better judgment of where to make this other bend here. That. I think that'll get me pretty close. So I'm going to make it a little bit sharper like that. Okay, that gives us a pretty good size, I think. So I'm going to try and make a little mark here. Leave a little tiny bit extra for, filing it down flat on the other side. I might as well cut this for the other one while I'm doing it. I'm trying to get better about keeping my hands out of the way when I'm doing stuff like this. If you haven't perused my channel in general, I think I'm getting around 210 video tutorials now. So you might do a little exploring and then maybe consider subscribing. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. If you wanted to see my channel without the commercials, you could always check out my Patreon. I have a low level tier for $5 a month that gets you advertising free videos. If you want to do one of the other tiers, you get some more privileges. Like I do at least 2, sometimes 3 exclusive tutorials for them over there. Many of which they get to choose the topics. And then there's a higher tier where we do some live streaming and stuff like that. I've gotten to know some people over the live stream. It's very nice. I generally make my my bezels into angular shape in order to solder them together, because I find I get a nicer solder joint. It's easier to balance a piece of solder on there as well. Just using the tips of my needle nose to reshape it. One side at a time, I find works best. If you end up liking this video, one of the earlier ones I did on the YouTube channel was me making a big kind of ornate dragonfly. I think it was a pin or a pendant, I don't remember which, or maybe it was a combo one. But that one is kind of a fun one. I'll put a link up there for you if you're interested. Looks like we did okay size-wise on that one. Like I said before, you want to put the solder joint somewhere on the side like this, not right on the point. It's always quite a bit stiffer there, so make it really, really hard to do if you did it that way. Yeah, if you're new to silversmithing, try a few regular cabochon bezels before you start doing stuff with faceted stones. You want to get a little comfortable with making bezels before you start doing something that is just a little more precise, probably. Yeah, that goes in there. That'll make for a nice body. It's a little bigger scale-wise here, but so to create a little step for these to sit on, since they're faceted stones and have a bottom that slopes like this, I usually use 18 gauge round and make a couple of layers to create a platform for the stone to sit on. The round ones are pretty easy. I just usually manually shape them into a circle. I want it to fit pretty perfectly. You could do this on a round nose pliers or however you prefer. Just got to where I can make them pretty close to the size I need by just doing this. I generally try and cut them just a little bit more, bigger than I need, because I'd like to snip them down until they fit in there tightly. I usually try to see if it goes in there. If it doesn't go in easily, or at least, you know, firmly and snugly, sticks out like that, I need to snip a little bit off then. You also want to make sure they sit flat, otherwise you have some wobbly platform for the stone to sit on. That wouldn't be too good. Alright, there's one. I usually do two for these. Pavilions come to a point, and you don't want that point sticking all the way through. You want it to be kind of protected. I think it's almost time to treat myself to a new file. My file's starting to get dull. So I already put the first one in there. And I'll set it on top of this one. I'll probably just use this to kind of push it down over. Make sure it's flush. I also want to make sure before we solder it in that it's sitting flat. Actually, let's go ahead and do this one, and then I'll solder them both in at the same time. So for marquees, in order to get a tight fit around there with these guys, I usually measure, you know, a little bit longer than twice the size. About right there. Use the corner of this to create kind of a notch that's slanted 45 degrees to each side. Be careful, this is pretty easy to cut right through. And I'm going to bend them right at that point. So I get sort of a sharpish point like that. And then I'm going to grab it near that point down there. And I'm going to bend this inwards like that. Flip it around. Inwards like that. Kind of looks like a fish. Then I can open it gradually. And if you need to, manually shape it a little bit. That's pretty close. We're okay, but it's just slightly too long. So, if I cut it just a little bit on each side like that, straight down the center. Sometimes you can just gradually remove it until it fits in there nicely. I bet that'll fit in there. Sure. Alright, let's make sure that's still sitting flat. Let's solder these little fellows in. So this guy first. You know what? I probably don't need 3, I'm just going to do 2. So I'm just going to heat it like a regular bezel here on the outside corner. Okay, looks good. Go ahead and file this flat on the bottom there. A nice flat surface. Do the same thing to this one. I'll be right back. Cut that. And I want to have a little space in between there in order to attach the wings to. And so I need something to connect these two together, but I don't want it to go all the way to the top of the bezel, because then I wouldn't be able to bend the bezel inwards towards the stone when I go to set the stone. And so I thought I probably was going to use some of this half round wire. It's low dome half round, meaning it's not a complete half circle when you look at it end on. It's kind of a flatter, wider piece then. And I think that'll work pretty well if I cut a little tiny piece of that. But in order to connect to that marquee, I need it to be kind of in a V shape. And on this side, I'll need it to be kind of in a half circle shape. So I think I already filed it flat on the end here. It's much easier to do part of this filing when you have it still attached to a bigger piece, because it gives you more to hold on to. So might kind of like make a mark in the center here to know where to get started. And then I'm going to use the corner of the file again to do that. You could just go use the Dremel and do that too, but either way, it's fine. So it is a little bit too wide since it's kind of a 90-degree angle like this. And so I'm going to have to curve it with something anyway. I can either file it or use the Dremel. I think I'm going to use the Dremel for speed's sake, so I'll be right back. It'll solder on okay, and I'll smooth it out the rest of the way. So the question is, how much space do I want between the head and the body? Probably not too much. Alright. So I'm going to go grind that into a little half circle at the top of this. So I think we can probably solder these guys together. I thought about, texturing it or something, but I think I'm going to leave it plain, and then once things are starting to get assembled, I'll kind of rethink it, and if I need to, I'll add some texture to it in a different way. So you may notice that I do a lot of pick soldering during this video. If you're interested, pick soldering is a skill that will take you to a different level, so you might want to see that video up there. That's a good spot to check it out. Looks like everything's pretty straight. That's good. That's new for me. I always look at it at first and then look straight, and then I solder it together and it's not straight. So, story of my life. It's time to start doing some wings now. So, if we're going to do this, these are going to be balled up on the end, so I need a piece that's going to be balled up here, and I'm going to need a piece that's balled up down here too. So I cut some that should be long enough, and we'll go ahead and ball the ends up. So I'm just balling the ends up just a little bit. By the way, on this video, to save time, because it's going to be kind of a bit of a long video putting together all of these details on here, especially times 4. So I'm going to just do 2 wings over here, and then off camera I'll do the other 2 to do it. So That should be long enough for there. I find when I'm doing big bends, if I grab it with the flat nose pliers and let the curve of the metal kind of happen by itself, when you just let it do that, you can get some pretty nice smooth bends like that. I think this one should go the whole length right there. And I think all of the other ones we got to piecemeal together, so let's do that. So the next one we cut will be for that spot. Some of these times I'll be filing little angles to match where I want it to attach to the other wire. And sometimes I may solder one side of it and then bend it to get where I want it to be, and then file it to make sure it flows in there nicely. So like I filed that angle just a little bit too steep. So and I think in order to get this to attach nicely there, I'll solder it there first, and then I'll cut that and file that so it fits nicely up into there, and then we'll solder that together, and then we'll start adding pieces. Kind of looks like an Egyptian eye right now from hieroglyphics. Yeah, I've kind of tapered it down like that. So let's solder that together. Oopsie. Two more pieces and then this wing's done. My original intent was to mount them between these guys. I think I'm going to end up mounting it on top like that. So I think that'll get us a better look rather than trying to stretch these out to get those in there or to redesign the whole wing. I do want it to be pretty prominent, so there's likely enough solder on the bottom of this thing and probably enough solder there too. So let's just flex it and see if we can't get it to stick down. That looks like it's soldered down, so I'm going to let that pickle for a while. Now we got to start doing the lower wing. Where did I put the rest of that? I know there's plenty of solder on this one right there. Well, if you can see well enough, you could actually see it kind of settle down over there. So Alright, so I'm going to make the two matching wings and then we'll kind of hook them all together. So I'll be back when I have those matching ones done. Hook them to the body and add some antennas for the bail. And I think we'll be done. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder these ones flat on the bottom here to the body right there. You know what? I think I might solder them to the side of the bezel too, just to give them some reinforcement. Then I'm probably going to cut these ends a little bit shorter. I'm going to overlap those a little bit. So we'll solder these ones on top of the other ones. And then we'll add our little antennas and antennae. And then we'll let it pickle, and then we'll set stones. Cutting these off a little bit shorter. Yeah. Take you instead. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to solder those closed, and I'm going to solder those to those, and then we should be able to pickle, and I think we can set the stones and finish. So. Yeah. Mm-hmm. just to make sure that I don't have to go back and redo anything, I'm going to check my solder joints, make sure everything's good. These guys, I'm eventually going to just turn them that way, this way, so the chain can go through it. I may even spin them around a couple times so they're stiffer. But everything looks copacetic to me. Clean out some of the debris from that magnesia block. Okay, I went ahead and I bent these guys around. I'll probably clean them up a little bit more with the Dremel. I set most of the stones because I was just going to do the same thing over and over again. I saved the big one for the last. So I filed them down to the level that they need to be to fit just about right. I did not put that in straight the very first try. Make sure he's sitting pretty flat like that. Okay, let's start with tips a little bit. I'm going to go kind of straight over. I want it to stay sitting straight and flat in the setting here. You got to check it from the side every now and again. See if it's still sitting straight. You'll have a tendency to lean to one side or the other as you put pressure on it. Once you get it to where it's starting to stay in place, then you can kind of really burnish it down. Burnishing is where you're pushing that top edge down with something smooth. Some people use a tool called a burnishing tool. I just use the rounded outer part of my needle nose. Alright, I guess camera's over here anymore. Alright, well, I'll do a little bit more cleanup and then we'll call that good. So I'll take some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well, that was the butterfly pendant. I hope you enjoyed that. There's tons of different kinds of butterfly pendants you can do. There's a zillion variations, lots of clip art you could copy. Just look online and see what you see and come up with a design of your own. It'll be really pretty, I bet. If you enjoyed watching this, make sure to hit the like button. That helps me out a great deal. And leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. And you know, if you got time, check out the video description for some important links. There's a link to my Patreon stuff. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of these nice notebooks. And there's even a link to my website if you want to see some of my jewelry for sale. So either way, thanks for coming by. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Happy silversmithing. Take care.